Edward Angelo Goodall was an English landscape and Orientalist painter, a member of the Goodall family of artists. Goodall was the son of Edward Goodall, the engraver of J.M.W. Turner's works, and his brothers were the artists Frederick Goodall, a Royal Academician, and Walter Goodall. His sister Eliza Goodall was also an artist. Edward Angelo was apprenticed to his father's office, and his own artistic talents came to the fore in his teens when he won a silver medal, and praise from Clarkson Stanfield R.A., at the Society of Arts for a picture of the landing of the Lord Mayor at Blackfriars Bridge. His work was exhibited at the Royal Watercolour Society. Moritz Richard Schomburg was commissioned by the Prussian government to map British Guyana's boundaries, accompanied by his brother Robert, who was to collect natural history specimens for the Royal Museum and the Botanical Gardens in Berlin. Richard was stricken by yellow fever shortly after his arrival in British Guyana. He and the expedition artist, W.L. Walton, returned to England. Goodall was chosen in 1841 as a replacement artist, receiving a salary of £150 per annum and payment of his passage to Guyana. Goodall was to sketch the people, landscape, plants, and animal life. The botanical watercolours that Goodall had made were exhibited in Berlin, and the sketches of the indigenous tribes in London and Paris. All the illustrations were later donated to the Colonial Office, made their way to the Department of Manuscripts at the British Museum, and are now at the British Library. The watercolours depict Guyana's indigenous peoples, some of whom are now extinct, and as such are an important ethnographical record. The paintings also feature topographical and botanical subjects. Some of Goodall's watercolours have been published. Goodall also kept a journal whilst on expedition. This is also now at the British Library. The journal sheds light on colonial life in Georgetown, where Goodall had 5 months to kill before the expedition departed, as well as the expedition, its findings and dangers, the indigenous peoples, and the character and temperament of Schomburg. Extracts from the journal have been published. After returning from Guyana in 1844, Goodall continued to exhibit his watercolours, chiefly at the Royal Society of Painters in Watercolours, to which he was elected a member in 1864, but also at the Royal Academy, the British Institution, and the Society of British Artists. In December 1854 Goodall was appointed war artist in the Crimea for the Illustrated London News. He witnessed the battles at the Alma and Balaclava, and the siege of Sebastopol. A sketchbook from Goodall's time in the Crimea is at the British Library. After the Crimea, Goodall travelled widely, visiting France, Spain, Portugal, Gibraltar, Egypt, Morocco, and Italy. Sketchbooks of some of his European travels are at the British Library. He continued to exhibit his work in London, and by 1901 had exhibited 328 works at the Royal Society of Painters in Watercolours and 36 at the British Institution. Goodall died on April 16, 1908 and is buried in Highgate Cemetery, London. List of Orientalist artists. Orientalism. Edward A. Goodall, Sketches of Amerindian Tribes 1841–1843. Frederick Goodall, The Reminiscences of Frederick Goodall, Rear Admiral. Linda Mowat, 4 paintings by Edward A. Goodall at the Pitt Rivers Museum, Oxford Trademark, Journal of the History of Collections, 5, pages 2239. Peter Riviere, The Guyana Travels of Robert Schomburg 1835–1844, 2 vols. John Louis Roget, A History of the Old Watercolour Society, now the Royal Society of Painters in Watercolours, 2 vols. Walter E. Roth, Richard Schomburg Trademark S Travels in British Guyana 1840–1844, 2 vols. Michael St. John McAllister, Edward Angelo Goodall, An Artist's Travels in British Guyana and the Crimea. Neil G. Slarkey, Frederick Goodall, Rear Admiral. John Ram, Artist Adventurer. Artwork, Goodall. The Goodall Family of Artists. Photo portrait of E. A. Goodall. Edinburgh from Calton Hill. Absent Thoughts. Springtime in Egypt near the site of ancient Memphis.